Ladies and gentlemen, if you know anything about the game of chess, then you know that the best player in the world is named Magnus Carlsen. You also know that my channel is essentially a PR front for all things Magnus Carlsen. And yesterday he did something extremely sensational, and I had to share it with all of you. Magnus played in the Chess.com Title Tuesday tournament, and he went 11-0. He played 11 games. He won all 11 games. He beat people like Hikaru, Fabiano Caruana, and other grandmasters, and he made it look completely effortless. He completely decimated the field. It was not even close, and I'm going to share highlights of every single one of those games with you right now. So, yeah, from my hotel room in Europe to all of you at home, let's enjoy Magnus Carlsen absolutely embarrassing and demolishing absolutely everybody in his way. I said absolutely twice, but I'm not going to re-record. When is the last time you did something 11 times correctly in a row? I feel like you probably can't even like urinate 11 times in a row correctly. You probably like pee on the floor or something. Seriously, I mean 11-0 is like seriously impressive stuff. So Magnus begins Title Tuesday with the white pieces against a 2500 rated player, and he begins with the bird opening because, you know, why not? He plays then e4, so now it's a French defense with the pawn on f4. He plays e5, so it's kind of like an advanced French type of thing. And we get a position where he dances the knight to c2 and plays the move d4, all right? Looks like a pretty reasonable position for white. His opponent was very aggressive early, trying to trade off pieces, trying to attack Magnus's king. Magnus built up a very nice dark squared pawn formation. And then Magnus put all his pawns on dark squares to activate dark pawn jutsu. A4, it's a real thing. Chess.com will drop down a little achievement and tell you you managed to put all your pawns on dark squares in the game. That's not actually true. And then Magnus attacked his opponent's king with g4. His opponent played king h1, king h8, and Magnus kept attacking. King on h1, king on h8, absolutely nothing in front of the king at all. We're still playing the pawn to h4. He's able to play this because the center is completely deadlocked, and that makes attacking a lot easier. His opponent tries to fight back. Magnus plays h5 anyway. His opponent tries to fight back. Magnus is like, you know Consuela from Family Guy when she's just like, no. That's essentially how Magnus plays against lower rated players. He's just like, no, I win. There's just not much you can do. It's just bishop e3, you play f4. Like his opponent actually is playing very, very decently. Like very decently, fighting back, not letting himself get bullied. The rook goes back to f8. Magnus plays king h2, and the queen goes back. And like his opponent is actually doing a pretty decent job. And it's just a matter of time. I mean, Magnus just dances around with his king. He's actually in a bad position, but it's just a matter of time. He wins the pawn on f4, rotates the queen over, jumps in with the knight, and trades down into a winning endgame, because if you take the bishop, pawn to g7. So, rook f3, king g4, this is hanging, this is hanging. His opponent resigns. That was game number one. Game number one of Title Tuesday is always a little bit shaky. You don't know what's going to happen, but the rest of it was hilarious. Magnus won all his games by also disrespecting his opponents every step of the way. He would play a6. Magnus played a6 every game with the black pieces. I'm not exaggerating. In the second game of Title Tuesday, he played a 2600 rated player, because that's what happens in tournaments. You go up like that. And then he played a Hikaru Khan. He played h6, he took on e4, and he turned the game into kind of like a weird Caro thing. He allowed the knight to go to d6. This looks very annoying, but he just gave a check, traded, put the queen in the center, and broke with e5, castled long, and then traded everything down into this endgame, which no human on the planet should lose to any other human on the planet unless you're playing Magnus. It's rook and knight versus rook and bishop, and it's completely symmetrical, but he's Magnus, so he's going to win. He also missed something really funny. There was a stockfish line here. He took on e5, sacrificing his queen to take and then take the queen back, but actually his opponent could have played king f1, and if Magnus had gone here after rook d8 Zwischenzug, he would have actually been losing. So sometimes you got to avoid a few things against the 2600s. You know, it happens. Magnus brings his king. He trades the rooks. Again, no human should lose this to any other human on the planet. Magnus advances his pawns. He creates a very strong post there, takes with the knight, brings the knight back to the center, And it's just a matter of time as he has completely frozen this side of the board, but his opponent only has 10 seconds, loses a pawn, trades down into a losing king and pawn endgame, and Magnus is going to queen with check, and that is why he is going to win this race. And there it is. One square before queening, it's check. And if we go back just a little bit, Magnus knew that was going to happen all the way back here. Check, take the bishop, and he knew he was going to win the race because after king g5, the king has to take both pawns because otherwise the pawn cannot get through. So white takes both pawns and lands on the square that geometrically loses him the game. And it took a little while, but his opponent resigned. 2-0. Now it's time to go up and up. Now we're going to face 2750. Actually, I know the person that he's playing here with the black piece is very strong, young player from the US. I've actually played chessically inclined many times. Chessically had a rough game this game. Probably part of that was the fact that his opponent was named Magnus Carlsen. It was a Rue Lopez. It was a Berlin, and it was d4, which is sort of like a really weird Berlin. He gave up both center pawns, but he starts firing away at his opponent. Knight takes c6. There's a line here. Bishop takes h2 is a super crazy move. King h1, and now you have to play queen h4. You have to go here. And chessically forgot that and did this first. And unfortunately, after this, I don't have to take your rook. You see, if I take your rook, knight takes f2 wins me the queen. But before that, I just do this. And that's it. And then black resigns. So Magnus plays a kind of a edgy sideline against the Spanish. His opponent doesn't remember all the cutting edge lines. Loses, unfortunately, in 14 moves because that's the way chess goes sometimes. Magnus is 3-0. Okay. Well, his next game is with the black pieces, and he's playing Vincent Keimer, German player. From this point forward, Magnus is only going to play 2900s, 3000s, and 3100 rated players. And he's still going to win every game. Spoiler alert. Sorry. So Magnus begins this game. It's insane, right? It's insane. Vincent turns the game into a London, basically arguing that the move a6 is stupid. So Magnus responds by Londoning the London. He's like, you want to play the London against me? All right, let's do it. His opponent turns it into a Queen's Gambit. And now it's like black has played some sort of weird Queen's Gambit with a pawn on a6. Magnus plays bishop d6, just completely unconcerned. Puts up a little triangle pawn setup. Magnus is now trying to get the jutsu of the light squared pawns. He just needs to play g6. Queen b3 targets the pawns on, and Magnus plays queen c7. Magnus is not a guy who lightly pushes his pawns. Like, he does not want to play moves like b5. If he can help himself, he's going to develop his queen. Rook c1. And just look at this. I mean, this is so funny. Staring into the eyes of danger because the rook is completely unguarded. So there's no useful discovery. I mean, you can play knight e2, but something tells me Magnus is going to see that. Bishop e2. Rook c8. Now, if you move the knight, for example, knight takes d5, Magnus is going to sacrifice his queen. You know why he's sacrificing his queen? Because he can. That's it. That is literally the reason. Knight h4. And the way Magnus is going to end up winning this game is he's going to, by the way, all pawns on light squares. So Magnus has put all his pawns on dark squares. He has put all his pawns on light squares. He has unlocked, he's doing side quests in the middle of Title Tuesday. And he sacrifices the rook to get to an endgame where he has two pieces for a rook. And the computer evaluates this as equal, but it's not. It's not equal because one of the opponents is the best endgame player probably of all time, unless you want to make an argument that it's Capablanca. We go to a queenless endgame. Magnus has his two pieces versus the rook. Two pieces are going to beat a rook like 8 times out of 10. And this game is no different, as Magnus lands a fork immediately and white resigns. But the truth is it was already very difficult for white because absolutely everything in black's position is defending everything else. And it was just a matter of time for black, you know, to go here, knight d5, rook b2, and just start hunting down all the weak pawns in the white position, and black has absolutely no risk. 4-0 while playing a6. Now, his next opponent is 3000, okay? Which, you know, 3000 is a very impressive rating when you play somebody like myself. Magnus is 243 points higher rated than this person. which is so stupid. I mean, that's just, I can't believe his rating is that high. This is Anton Karabov. You would not know that from his legal name on chess.com, which is Gogief. I have absolutely no idea what this means, by the way. If anybody can tell me, I would be really impressed. Magnus plays b3 this game. Nimso Larsen. Completely normal stuff. Plays d4. And in this game, we're going to see Magnus not disrespecting his opponent, not playing anything stupid or ridiculous, but rather a beautiful attacking game of chess. He plays a3, b3 to prevent anything from coming over here. He plays queen e2, knight e5 centralizing, and the second his opponent castles, there goes the warning shot. Pawn to g4, with ideas of pawn to g5, obviously, with ideas of h4, h5, and with the idea to castle queenside. Opposite side castling, the gloves are off, it's a hockey fight at the face-off, knight to g6, he takes, and now Magnus plays king b1 and king a2 because he needed to evacuate his king to safety before starting his own attack. He could have maybe played h4, but queen e7 looks really unpleasant, and you might just need to go h5 and just kind of go for it. Magnus isn't like that. He's a calculated, cold-blooded killer. Rook c7, and now he plays h4, and now he plays rook h3, and there's just absolutely nothing black can do. Black probably needs to sack the rook. That's like literally what you might have to do to slow white down. But knight e4 by Korobov, Magnus just takes, and now he just gets rid of the c-pawn as a weakness altogether. So maybe now black has to play things like b5. But instead, Korobov plays f5. Magnus plays h5. He's knocking on the door of the king side. h6 and h7, and let me tell you right now, this bishop on b2 is going to absolutely slaughter the king in the corner. Magnus's h-pawn waltzes through the position, he shreds it open entirely, utilizing all of the open lines, and he ends the game in style. Knight takes e4. Why knight takes e4? Because of this, and because of this. The rook is not actually hanging, because if you take it, queen to g8, and then I promote to a new queen, and I got news for you. I don't even care if you take the rook. That's literally my threat, because I will promote to a queen, and it will be mate. In fact, the position is so disrespectful, you can take this and promote to a rook. I don't know why it's not letting me, but maybe it's because it's a capture. You could promote to a double rook checkmate. That is how brutal Magnus attacked Korobov in this game. This man sealed off all of black's pieces. Look at this cluster of pieces that literally never participated in the game. They just never got a chance to move. All of Korobov's pieces stood frozen as Magnus bashed open the position and won in style. Folks, look at the position after rook c7. Black's pieces literally never moved. They were frozen as Magnus infiltrated and brutalized the black king. I mean, it's just insane. 5-0. Next opponent, Denis Lazovic, strong grandmaster from Belarus, a young player like 16, 17 years old, d4, a6, doesn't matter. Now we go back to Hikaru Khan. This time it's an exchange variation, and black has played the move a6, which is really not a very useless move. Magnus plays knight e7, plays f6, and brings the bishop back to the f7 square from where he wants to play the move e5. Then he lands a knight into the center of the board. We have queen to b4 offering a queen trade, and we get a queenless middle game. This is still a middle game, I would say, because so many pieces are on the board, but it's maybe very early stage endgame. Black has good chances here against this pawn and against these two pawns. Let's see what Magnus does. He plays rook b8, which looks very ugly, but the idea is probably to mobilize the pawns very soon or rotate the rook back to the center. It's a very locked position, very big maneuvering game here, and now we have a trade, leaving black with this kind of ugly bishop. So let's see how Magnus is going to put it to the test. b6. First we kick the knight out, then we kick out the rook. Then we put rook c8 and rook c1, and we trade off one rook. Do we trade off the second rook? Okay. We kick out the knight goes back to a2, and at some point we're going to activate our bishop. There's the bishop, and the bishop is going to infiltrate. You can't really take me, probably, because I'm going to dislodge the defender of this pawn. Lazovic plays knight b5. Here comes the king. Oh, bishop comes in, bishop comes back. King to d8, he gets a couple of pawns, knight takes d4, it's a mad scramble, it's 4 pawns each. Is Magnus's tree going to be broken here? We have a king, bishop, king, knight endgame, it's a king race. The bishop goes to d5, the king is active, g5, a4, taking away all of white space. Oh. And it's a mouse slip. Deep, deep, deep in the tank. G takes h4 was what white wanted to play. And this game would have went on for a while, and probably white would have drawn it, because I just don't think there is enough here. But of course, Magnus would have posed as many problems as possible. Well, he posed time problems in this game, and his opponent played g4, and that's just the end. You got to get a little bit lucky sometimes to get 11-0, just like you have to get a little bit lucky to win the World Series of Poker. 6-0. The big three are yet to come. His next opponent is Matthias Bluebaum. This time he plays a3 with white. Dude, this man just won't stop. I mean, this is the most disrespectful thing on... Like, he's playing a3 with white now. d5. Now he plays a London with white. He played a London with black with the move a3. Now he's playing a London with white. Bishop d6. He takes on c5, and he kind of turns it into a little Queen's Gambit decline type of situation. Okay, rook d1, bishop e2. Relatively symmetrical, maybe slightly better for white. e4 taking a little bit of space. e5 taking a little bit of space. But Bluebaum is doing a good job here. Queen e2, and it's time to attack the black king. Symmetrical pawn structure. D and c pawns missing from both sides. Takes. Bluebaum plays the move rook to d8, looking to trade the rooks. Magnus plays bishop d3. And now h5. And knight e4. And the knight jumps into d6. Now, black is still doing okay here, according to the computer, prior to that move. But too many tactics. Bishop hits this, and Bluebaum has to go here, lose his rook. Bishop takes e6 is a discovered attack on the queen. You cannot take the bishop. And Magnus escapes with an extra exchange. And when it's all said and done, he's just going to be up a comfortable amount of material in the endgame. Is this drawable? Because all the pawns are on the same side? Maybe. Could Stockfish draw it against the human? Maybe. But Magnus is not just human. He is kind of a juggernaut. So it's rook and 2 versus knight and 2, but the pawns are not the same. Magnus walks his king forward, pushes the black king backwards, centralizes his king, g3, pokes and pokes and pokes, and there's the king, and the pawn's not going anywhere because the rook can always come back to stop it, and the black knight and black king and black pawn are immobile. It takes some 60 moves, but Magnus simplifies into a winning king and pawn endgame, and checkmates his opponent some moves later. Effortless. For him. 8-0. 7-0? I don't even know. 7-0. I think I've given him an extra point. Next game, he's playing Fabiano. a6. This man played Fabiano Caruana in a world championship match, and he's playing a6 against him in Title Tuesday. Fabi plays c4, which is probably the critical move because it prevents black from playing a normal-looking Caro-Kann. He plays d5 anyway. Prevents black from playing d4. Okay. Knight f6. Now it's like some weird Caro-esque position, right? Bishops are out. Bishop h5. Fabi developing very nicely. Pushes his pieces back. Rook e1, rook c1. Magnus plays f5. Fighting for the light squares on the king side. Fabi goes knight e5, initiating complications. Magnus takes this pawn because this pawn has to guard the knight. Fabi goes here. Bishop takes e2 first, and now Fabi sneaks in bishop f4. Bishop is still hanging, and there's some discovered attacks here. g5. That's a Chad move. Leaves the bishop hanging, thrusts a pawn in front of his own king, and threatens to get tripled pawns. Fabi goes rook e1. Extremely tense game where all of Magnus's position is kind of put to the test. Rook e7. Now here come the rooks. They get traded off. It's queen and bishop versus queen and knight. There is no way Fabi can lose this position, right? The queen slides in, but it doesn't really matter because the king is safe. Bishop g7, looking for bishop here, and then queen to g1 mate. Fabi plays queen d1 back, a5. That pawn is asking questions. Okay, but there's no way. There's no way you can lose this with white, right? It's kind of a fortress. He's taking away his squares, but how is he going to win the position? Threatening a queen trade. The king is walking to the center of the board. Oh my god. He's walking his king and he's eating Fabi's pawns. Queen to d1 was threatening mate. And king c4. And Magnus wins this game by walking his king to the other side of the board. When all things were equal, when it looked like white had set up a very nice defensive fortress where he protected everything in his position, the way Magnus won this game with tripled isolated f-pawns. Last time I've seen 3 f's is on your report card. He walked his king to the other side of the board to join the party. The king just took a journey, facilitated the advancement of the pawn, and he won the game against Fabiano Caruana in style. A1 is unstoppable. Fabi never had a chance to break forward with any of these pieces. 8-0. Next game, he's playing against Baku Boulevard. This is Ralph Mamedov, I believe. E4, C5, and this time we have bishop b5 check. We actually have a normal game. No A3. Magnus attacks in the center, gets the two bishops, and then gives it right back in order to control some squares on this side of the board. Develops his knight out to c4 to control more dark squares, develops all the rest of his pieces, literally rook, bishop, queen, everybody gets a turn. Now that rook goes to the b file, and now, as always, h4. His opponent plays knight e7, we go to this is an endgame, I would say, pawn to c3, offering up this pawn for the b7 pawn. His opponent says yes. His opponent takes on a5, Magnus takes, rook takes bishop, and now it's rooks and multiple pawns on the board, knight back to c4. In fact, Magnus is actually trailing by a pawn, but it's going to be very difficult for his opponent to defend the rest of these pawns. And it's just a matter of time. King back to g8, knight goes to e3, and we have 4 pawns each in a knight versus bishop rook endgame. Centralized knight, brings up the king, kicks out the rook back to the g6 square, and activates the king a little bit further. It's a slightly better position for white, but he is up 1.5 minutes on the clock. He pushes the black rook into defense, and as always, Magnus trades 1 rook. If you want to win a rook endgame, a good way to do it is to trade 1 rook. Obviously, Mamedov doesn't want a rook trade, but it's just a matter of time. I mean, yes, the position is equal, but there's a lot of questions being asked. Black has 20 seconds versus Magnus's 150, and if you're going to play a blitz game, it's your responsibility to manage your time wisely. It's just a matter of time. Magnus is going to find different angles and approaches to infiltrate and pose problems. And he does get his rook trade. He hits the f7 pawn, and he removes the defender of the bishop, and he wins the game in style. 9-0. His biggest test is yet to come in the form of Hikaru. There it is. This is the matchup that we tune in for every single time we get a Title Tuesday. It's exactly what we want. It's the equivalent of watching the 2 biggest kids in school fight on the playground every Friday or Thursday or anytime they want to fight. And Magnus starts this game against Hikaru with the move a6. Very nice. He's been playing a6 the entire Title Tuesday. I'm actually kind of shocked Hikaru didn't go for a3. Instead, he plays d4, and he actually disallows Magnus from playing the move d5. But this is an overcommitment. I mean, I'm not coaching Hikaru. He obviously knows what he's doing. He just didn't want Magnus to play d5. It was kind of more of like a psychological thing. It's a little bit of an overcommitment, though, because Black doesn't actually have to take and can just play knight f6, and now both of these pawns are kind of under fire. But that was all part of Hikaru's plan. Takes, e5, so now the knight has to go. This is all part of the Hikaru strategy. Knight takes d5. Now Magnus plays here, but Hikaru runs into some problems here with queen a5 check and losing the pawn on e5. Like, again, I don't really know if this was pre-planned, but he's just a pawn down with the white pieces. What he does have going for him, however, is the fact that the black queen can sort of be used like a piñata. And now he activates his queen. So it's just total chaos. Hikaru is fighting fire with fire. The knight is hanging, the pawn is hanging, the bishops are staring at each other. He's going to castle long. Maybe he's going to put his knight on d6. Magnus plays d5. Hikaru grabs the pawn on g7, forcing Magnus to move his rook. Now he can't castle. Takes. It's a firefight. Knight back to e3. The queen pokes at the b2 pawn. You can't actually castle because knight takes f2 is going to be a fork, so we have rook to b1. Knight to c6, developing a knight. Hikaru goes here and removes the knight from the center of the board before playing queen f6, queen f4. But now f5, and e5 is a problem because e5 is going to be the start of a pawn avalanche. So Hikaru plays knight c4, and now queen c7, and the players begin shuffling moves. Now I really wonder if after queen c7 there was anything better than queen to d8. This might have been the moment. This could have been the moment that Magnus would have gotten his Title Tuesday ruined on the perfect run, because I'm not sure there's much better after queen to c7. Maybe Magnus would have tried to go for something and just take a worse position, but Hikaru is the one who chooses not to repeat moves. But now e5 and bishop to e6, and probably the most gangster move of this game was played right here. Hikaru was like, well, I'm going to play f3 because Magnus's king is in the center. I'm going to play f3, I'm going to get my knight out, I'm going to castle, and I'm going to smack him down the f-file. And I have knight d6. So Hikaru plays f3, and Magnus says, call an ambulance, but not for me. King to g8. Magnus manually castles. He doesn't castle in one move. He has to walk his king out of danger to the castling position, and now it's actually white who is going to get butchered on the f-file. And in just literally 3 moves, the position goes from worse to e takes f3, losing for white because the knight on c4 is on pre. Hikaru has to lose a couple of pawns, but Magnus now approaches, the queen comes in, pawn to f3, and it's game over in 35 moves as Magnus plays rook takes d6, this and this and this is on the way, and Hikaru resigns. 10-0. This man cannot be denied, and you already knew when he got to 10-0, ain't no way was this man not going to win the final game of Title Tuesday. Alexander Bortnik in his way. Magnus goes for a double fianchetto, plays d3, knight d2, and plays rook a2 and queen a1. Now this looks like Magnus is disrespecting his opponent. He is, but this is actually a real strategy. I mean, it looks kind of absurd, but and if you do this, you should be banned from chess, but he knows what he's doing. The point is that now he has a target from the corner of the board, and he also can now double his rooks kind of at will. And it's an endgame. It's an 8-pawn middle game. It's an endgame. The more pieces we trade, and Magnus begins marching his opponent down. 10-0. The bull going straight at the matador, waving the red flag. This is essentially what this position is. Is Magnus going to successfully march his opponent down, or will he be repelled? CB5. Magnus takes that way so that the knight takes, and there we go. The imbalance has been created. It's only 4 pawns for black. It's 5 for white, and this pawn might be a liability for black. Rook a2. Magnus goes for the bishop versus knight endgame. And you know what? If rook takes d5 were to be played, you know what Magnus would have done? He would have traded the rooks. He would have traded the rooks, and he would have tried to go, or he would have played rook b7, rook c8. He would have tried to go for that type of endgame. ED, bishop f5. Here comes the king. He is unafraid. It's a rook endgame. He's pretty damn good at those. Rook takes b7, rook back to b4, and he's up a pawn. It might be equal according to Stockfish. His opponent is not Stockfish. Magnus marching forward, king f3, king f2. Might be a draw, might be holdable, but it's probably just a matter of time as the advantage is growing, the king is pushed back, the d-pawn advances, and it's just a matter of time until black has to resign. Magnus transforms the game into a winning king and pawn endgame, as he has done so many times in this video, promotes to a queen, 74 moves, game over, Title Tuesday over, 11-0. In a variety of different ways and styles and ridiculous openings and configurations. Magnus beats an average rating pool of like 3,000 plus, 6 grandmasters. At times it looked dicey, but it was never in doubt. 11 games, 11 wins, Stockfish level performance. What more do we want? What more do we want? You know what I want? I want you to get out of here.